Praise be to God. I'm going to be a father.
Yes, but listen to me. A child is a gift, and you must protect this family now.
Here they are, my sweet. I hope I wasn't too long.
Oh, perfect. You brought the chili salt too. Thank you.
Look at the disgrace you have brought to this family. You will not ruin this wedding for my daughter.
I have had enough.
Take your things and leave my house.
I remember 1978 vividly. We argued then too about the land.
She is perfect, Zainabta. Thank you. Our little Therese. God is truly good. Praise be
Under
to
the
God.
scorching
I'm
sun
going
of
to be a
Yond,
father.
the heat rising
Yes, but
from the
listen to
asphalt
me.
blurred the
A child
surroundings.
is a gift,
Alaini,
and you
a
must
gentle-faced
protect
young
this
man with
family now.
eyes always
Here they
sparkling
are.
with hope, strained to drive his old yellow taxi through the crowded streets of Langkok district. The blaring car horns, the pungent smell of diesel fumes, and the passengers' complaints about traffic jams didn't bother him. His heart was beating to a different rhythm, the rhythm of anticipation. As the sun began to set, painting the tin roofs of the poor neighborhood red, Alaini parked his car in front of his small house. Without wiping the sweat from his forehead, he hurried up the narrow steps. When the door opened, a faint scent of incense, mingled with the aroma of food, greeted him. Zainabta was sitting there on the worn fabric sofa, her eyes holding something strange. "You're back, Alaini," she said, her voice low and full of emotion. Alaini sat down beside her, taking his wife's small hands. Zainabta took a deep breath, placing his hand on her belly. "We're going to have a baby, Alaini. An angel is coming to us." Time seemed to stand still. Alaini was speechless. Then a radiant smile burst across his face. He lifted his wife, spinning her around in the small, cramped living room, almost knocking over the low table. Their laughter echoed down the hallway, causing the neighbors below to bang on the ceiling in complaint. But Alaini didn't care. He was the son of a poor farmer from the West who had come to the city with nothing but a high school diploma, and now he was about to become a father. However, that joy was soon overshadowed by the presence of his mother-in-law Mangajua. She was a powerful woman, a successful businesswoman at Makalo Market, who always regarded her daughter as the most precious gem in the world. The next morning she arrived with a basket full of food and an unusually stern expression. "Listen, soon-in-law," Mangajua said, her voice deep and authoritative, like a judge's. "Zainabta is carrying your blood. In this land we have unchangeable rules. When a pregnant woman cries, the child is the first to suffer. If you don't meet her demands, the child will be born with the scars of deprivation." Alaini looked at her, his eyes filled with worry. He didn't know much about the mysteries of pregnancy, but he revered the wisdom of the elderly. Mangajua continued, "You must treat her like a queen. Whatever she desires, it is not her will, but the child's will. Don't let your child bear a mark on her face because of a father's selfishness." Her words weighed heavily on Alaini's shoulders. He looked at his wife, saw her gentle smile, and promised himself, "Even if I have to sell this taxi, I won't let my child suffer a single scar." Little did he know that this promise was the beginning of a labyrinth with no escape.
Here they are, my
The first few days passed in a magical atmosphere. Alaini worked harder than ever.
You brought
Woke
the
up at
chili
4
salt
a.m.
too.
to greet
Thank
the earliest
you.
customers and returned home when the streets had gone to sleep. Whenever he felt tired, he would think of the little angel in his wife's womb, and his strength would return. On a rare Sunday morning, when she had some free time, as sunlight streamed through the window, Zainabta gently shook his shoulder. "Alaini, I'm craving green mangoes." He didn't complain about the sleepiness still lingering in his eyes. He slipped on his sandals and hurried to the neighborhood market. After an hour of searching, he returned with a bag of green mangoes still covered in a white powdery coating. Along with a jar of coarse salt and the spiciest red chilies from Madagascar. Watching Zainabta devour those tart mangoes with relish, her eyes closed in delight, Alaini felt a strange sense of satisfaction. The child seems to really enjoy this, he thought to himself. But that was just the beginning. The following week at midnight, Zainabta spoke up again. This time, she craved ndali, a traditional dish of bitter herbs cooked with peanuts and shrimp. But she didn't want the kind sold at the end of the street. "I'm craving the ndoli made by my best friend's mother, all the way in Muvagata district," she whispered. Muvagata lies on the other side of the city, its roads riddled with potholes and dim, yellowish streetlights barely illuminating the area. Alaini set off again in his taxi. He drove through the dark streets, patiently waiting for the woman to wake up so she could cook him a steaming pot of ndali when he returned home. Drenched in sweat, his eyes lit up at the sight of his wife enjoying the meal. Alaini's devotion quickly became the talk of the entire Lankok neighborhood. At the repair shop, Uncle Paulin patted him on the shoulder and laughed. "Hey, young man, you're learning about real life. Pregnant women are like a storm. You can only go with the flow, not fight against them, Chantal." The hairdresser on the first floor regularly brought them waxed bananas and roasted peanuts as encouragement for the best husband in the neighborhood. However, Mamang Ajua still showed up regularly, each time with a new, higher demand. She sat in the small living room, observing Alaini like a strict manager. "Yes. Zainabta wants grilled creepy fish," she declared one day. "But it has to be grilled fish from a specific vendor at the Madagascar market, one who only grills fish over oak wood charcoal." Alaini began to realize something was changing. His savings, the money he'd been accumulating for 3 years in the hope of one day owning his own taxi instead of renting, were dwindling rapidly. Each trip to find food cost not only money for groceries but also for gas, and more importantly, wasted time that he could have used to earn extra income. But every time he saw Zainabta stroking her increasingly round belly and saying, "Our child is so discerning, honey, and knows what tastes best," Alaini would smile. He believed these were the trials every man had to face. Little did he know that behind his wife's happy smiles and his mother-in-law's admonishments, a real storm was brewing, and it would soon sweep away the last vestiges of peace in his family. As time passed, Zainabta's belly grew noticeably larger and rounder, a promise of new life. But proportional to the fetus's growth was the disappearance of her rationality and her demands. The local dishes of Yond no longer seemed sufficient to satisfy the noble child within her. One early morning, while the fog still enveloped the hills surrounding the city, Alaini was about to wheel his bike out of the gate to begin his 14-hour shift. "Alaini, I couldn't sleep last night," she sighed, her eyes gazing into the distance. "I dreamed of Kent mangoes from Mali. Not the sour kind from the market near our house, but the golden, sweet ones, imported by plane, only sold at the fancy stalls in the central market." Alaini stopped dead in his tracks. He knew that kind of mango, the price of a single imported one from Mali, was equivalent to his entire morning's earnings from driving. "But honey, we just paid the electricity bill, and I need to change the oil in the taxi." Before he could finish speaking, Mamang Ajua appeared from the kitchen like a phantom of criticism. With her hands on her hips, her voice sharp as a knife, she said, "Son-in-law, are you starting to be calculating with your wife and the baby again? Do you know that if Zainabta hadn't eaten that mango, the child would have been born with a large yellow birthmark on its forehead? Do you want it to grow up in shame just because you begrudge a few francs?" The fear of spiritual scars once again choked Alaini's reason. He silently put away his car keys and walked to the central market. 2x5 ripe golden Mali mangoes. He had to use the money he had set aside to pay off his debt to Uncle Paulin.
When he brought the mangoes home,
Zainabta only ate half of them before giving up because the taste was unlike in the dream. Alaini's heart ached when he saw the 10,000 francs lying abandoned in the trash can. The absurdity didn't stop there. A few days later, she craved smoked fish again. But it had to be the kind from his grandmother's village, a 4-hour drive from Yaoundé along bumpy dirt roads. To please his wife, Alaini took a day off, borrowed gasoline from a colleague, and drove there exhausted. When he brought the fish home, the pungent smell of smoke made him nauseous from exhaustion, and Zainabta complained it was too salty after just one bite. The parking attendants began to look at Alaini with pity. "Hey Alaini, you look like a walking corpse," warned Samba, a long-time driving friend. "Your wife is draining you dry. Pregnancy is natural, not an excuse to ruin your husband." But Alaini just shook his head. He believed he was fulfilling his duty as a man. He didn't realize that his patience was being exploited to fuel an insatiable selfishness. By the 6th month of his pregnancy, Alaini no longer recognized himself in the mirror. His eyes were sunken with dark circles, and his hands trembled whenever he gripped the steering wheel. He worked until midnight, then woke up at dawn to hunt for the bizarre items. Zainabta requested wild honey from the south, butter from a specific farm in Bafazum, or even fresh live prawns just shipped from the port of Krebi. Each request was a stab in his already empty pockets. His savings for a car vanished like snow in the sun. To make ends meet, Alaini began borrowing. He borrowed 5,000 francs from Ingjoa, then 10,000 from another colleague. Finally, he had to approach Uncle Paulin, embarrassed, to ask for a larger loan. "Alaini, listen," Uncle Paulin said, his face serious as he looked at the poor young man. "Love is about sharing, not enslavement. You're killing yourself. The child needs a healthy father more than those luxurious meals." But upon returning home, all of Uncle Paulin's advice vanished before Mamanga Jua's manipulation and Zainabta's tears. One afternoon, Alaini found Zainabta engrossed in a fashion magazine. "Alaini, look," she exclaimed, pointing to a picture of a famous singer wearing a sparkling gold necklace. "I feel like babies love sparkly things. I want a necklace like this so my child will have a radiant soul." Alaini felt a lump in his throat. "Zainabta, I don't have a single penny left. I haven't even finished paying my car rental for this month." Zainabta immediately burst into tears. "You don't love me and our child anymore?" My mother was right. Men change when women become unattractive because of pregnancy. Mamanga Jua stormed out of the room. "Son-in-law, do you want your child to be born with a birthmark shaped like a necklace on its neck? Do you want it to live its whole life bearing the mark of poverty just because its father refused to buy its mother a piece of jewelry?" In desperation and exhaustion, Alaini did something crazy. He sold his only smartphone, the one he'd saved up for 2 years by sacrificing food and clothing, and used the money to buy a gold necklace at Makalo Market. It wasn't exactly like the picture, but it shone. Zainabta wore it for one day, then put it in a drawer because it hurts my neck. That night, Alaini sat alone in the darkness of the living room, counting the last few coins left on the table. He owed rent, gas, and friends. His health was failing, his spirit broken. He looked into the bedroom where his wife and mother-in-law slept soundly. And for the first time in his life, he felt a bitter pang. He wondered, was this really how a family should be built? Could a child born into debt and a father's ruin truly be happy, as his mother-in-law said? Outside the window, old neighbor Therese quietly watched the flickering light in Alaini's room. She sighed, knowing that the real storm was yet to come. Alaini's patience was like a rope stretched too far, and with just one more jolt, it would snap, bringing about the collapse of an entire home. The 7th month of his pregnancy arrived with the stifling heat of the Yaun dry season, making the air in his small Langkok apartment as oppressive as a bakery oven. Alaini sat at his wooden table, his trembling fingers counting the last few coins. He needed 15,000 francs to pay his rent for the next 3 days, but he had less than 2,000 francs in his pocket. He owed Asamba Taunton Matthew and the building manager. Debt surrounded him like a steel net. Just then, Zainabta exclaimed from the sofa, her eyes glued to her phone screen. "Alaini, look. Isn't it beautiful?" He looked up. On the screen was a pristine white wedding dress with exquisite gold embroidery, accompanied by a long, flowing silk sash. It was a dress from a high-end boutique in the Bastos Districtone area for the upper class and expats. "It's beautiful, dear," Alaini replied listlessly, intending to return to his calculations. "I want to wear it," Zainabta whispered, her eyes sparkling with longing. "I want to wear this dress for my pre-birth photo shoot." It's a way to preserve the most beautiful memories of their child. Alaini felt dizzy. "Zainabta, please." "Can't. How much does that dress cost?" Mamanga Jua entered, as always, with her answer prepared. "It's only 150,000 francs, if you buy it outright." "But son-in-law, I've already asked. They rent it out for 50,000 francs a day." Silence enveloped the room, heavy and ominous. 50,000 francs. That was almost 2 months' rent. It represented the sweat and tears of a week of non-stop driving. "No," Alaini replied, his voice low, but unusually firm. "I can't do that. Don't have the money. We have to save for the birth, rent, and baby supplies." Zainabta's face instantly changed color. Tears began to stream down her face. "You don't love me anymore. Despise me because I'm fat and ugly now. You don't want to do anything for me and our child anymore." Mamanga Jua waved her hand, pointing directly at Alaini's face. "I knew it. men are all the same. At first, you make all sorts of promises, but when your wife is at her weakest, you're stingy with every penny. Do you want your child to have a birthmark shaped like a dress on their face because their mother cried and begged? The first time, the anger that Alaini had suppressed for the past 7 months erupted like a volcano. He jumped to his feet, sweeping the pile of bills off the table. Weak, stingy, Alaini roared. I sold my phone, worked until midnight, borrowed money from everywhere to buy you every mango from Mali, every fish from a distant village, that necklace you threw aside in your drawer, now a wedding dress just for a photo? We never even had a church wedding. What more do you want from me? Do you want me to sell my soul? The entire room fell silent at Alaini's rage. Zainabta stood frozen, her lips trembling with astonishment. She had never seen her usually gentle husband so angry, but instead of remorse, her mother's pride and manipulation had overwhelmed everything. You dare yell at me? Zainabta sobbed, clutching her pregnant belly. Mother, can you hear me? He disrespects his child. He says the life inside me is a burden. Mamang Ajua stood between the two like an iron shield. Son-in-law, you've gone too far. You've insulted my daughter and the child. A man who couldn't even afford a dress for his wife doesn't deserve to be a father. If that's what you think, then suit yourself. Alaini laughed bitterly, a laugh filled with heartbreak. I've done everything a human being can do. If your love is measured only by the value of a dress, then perhaps I've loved the wrong person. Zainabta grabbed a bag, hastily stuffing a few clothes into it with trembling hands. I'm going back to my mother's house. I could live with a heartless man who wants to see his child suffer for the rest of her life because of his narrow-mindedness. Go away, Alaini yelled, turning her face away to hide the tears welling up in her eyes. Go enjoy your frivolous pleasures. Leave me alone. The door slammed shut with such force that it shook the fragile wall. The sound of the two women's footsteps faded down the hallway. The neighbors Chantal, Paulin, and Luke the tailor stood outside, watching Zainabta weep as she left with her mother, who was muttering curses. Alaini slumped onto the sofa, the room now eerily empty. The silence after the storm was more terrifying than the screams. He looked around the living room, still littered with pieces of green mango, the gold necklace gleaming in the open drawer, all testaments to his blind devotion. He started to cry. By the first time since learning he was going to be a father, he cried not from exhaustion, but from loneliness. He loved Zainabta, he loved his unborn child, but he felt like a toy that had been squeezed dry and discarded when it was no longer useful. Outside the window, the elderly neighbor, Mrs. Therese, watched Zainabta get into her mother's taxi, murmuring softly. Sometimes, you have to lose everything to understand the value of what you once had. This storm needs to sweep away the vanity so that love can have room to sprout again. That night Alaini couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the darkness, staring into space. The next 2 days were hellish. He didn't eat, drink, or go to work. The yellow taxi sat motionless on the street like a lifeless corpse. Meanwhile, at her mother's house, Zainabta was also crying, her pillow soaked with tears. Regret began to creep into her mind as she saw the empty room devoid of Alaini's warmth. But her pride was too great to turn back. 2 days after the argument erupted, the Langkak neighborhood was shrouded in a heavy atmosphere.
We argued then
Alaini
too
stopped going to
about
work.
the land.
His
She
yellow
is-
taxi, covered in road dust, sat idle as a testament to despair. Meanwhile, at his mother's house, Zainabta locked himself in his room, his pride slowly being eroded by longing and emptiness. Mrs. Therese, the oldest and most respected woman in the neighborhood, decided that the silence had lasted long enough. She didn't invite, she ordered. She sent Luke the tailor to find Zainabta, and had Paulin to bring Alaini to her backyard where an ancient mangwire tree provided cool shade. That afternoon, under the lush green foliage, an unwelcome reunion took place. Alaini arrived with a gaunt face and sunken eyes. Zainabta was accompanied by Mamang Ajua, her face swollen from crying. The atmosphere was so tense that you could hear a leaf fall. Old Mrs. Therese sat on a carved wooden chair, slowly observing each person. When Mamang Ajua was about to criticize Alaini, she raised her hand, a decisive gesture that silenced everyone. Ajua, be quiet and listen, the old woman said, her voice low but authoritative. Die. You are my friend, but you are using your love to poison your daughter's home. The old woman turned to Zainabta, taking her trembling hand. My daughter, listen to my story. In 1978, when I was pregnant with my third child, a terrible drought swept through this region. My husband, a construction worker, worked until his hands bled just to earn a few cassava roots. I also craved meat and delicious fruit, but I never let my husband feel ashamed for not being able to afford them. The old woman paused, her cloudy eyes gazing into space, as if reliving the past. I took those cassava roots, cooked them with all my love, and thanked God for giving me a husband who didn't abandon his family. I didn't need a wedding dress for photos, needed my husband's dignity and the unity of my family. A child isn't born with scars because their mother didn't eat well, but they will grow up with scars in their soul if their parents tear their home apart for vanity. The old woman turned to Alaini, and love doesn't mean accepting everything. Love means knowing how to say no to protect your family from bankruptcy. Don't let superstitious stories scare you. A child only suffers when their father is unable to raise them because of senseless debts. Under the mangwire tree, the truth was laid bare. Zainabta looked down at Alaini's calloused hands, realizing for the first time how much they had aged because of her. A belated remorse welled up inside her, and she knelt before her husband, sobbing uncontrollably. Mamang Ajua also fell silent, the rigidity on her face melting into tears of guilt. Just this once, Mrs. Therese concluded. Go home, burn that magazine, and together create a budget based on love and reality. This child needs a healthy father and a grateful mother.
She is
The last 2
perfect,
months of her
Zainabta.
pregnancy were a
Thank
completely
you.
different journey.
Our little
No more
Therese.
late-night fishing trips to distant
God
villages,
is truly
no more
good.
expensive Mali mangoes. Zainabta had changed. She learned to be content with the oranges at the local market and the simple grilled fish from a street vendor. She took the time to massage Alaini's aching shoulders after each shift, and he, for the first time in months, was able to get a full night's sleep. They sat together at the wooden table, once the battleground of their arguments, now where they meticulously calculated every franc in preparation for the birth. Alaini gradually paid off her small debts to her colleagues. Peace returned to the Lankok apartment, warmer and more genuine than ever before. On a night of torrential rain, as thunder rumbled across the young sky, Zainabta went into labor. Alaini didn't panic. He lifted his wife into his yellow taxi, his hands steady on the steering wheel, and drove through the pouring rain to the hospital. The baby's cry rang out at dawn, clear and full of life. It was a beautiful baby girl with smooth skin and eyes as bright as stars. Alaini trembled as he held her in his arms, unconsciously searching her tiny face. Look, Zainabta whispered, tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks. She doesn't have a single birthmark. She's perfect. They named their daughter Therese, in honor of their elderly neighbor who had saved their marriage. A week later, a small party was held in Mrs. Therese's yard. There were no fancy dishes or elaborate decorations, just ripe bananas, roasted peanuts. And the familiar rustic and dolly the whole neighborhood was there, Chantal, Paulin, and the tailor Luke. They laughed and chatted, offering their blessings to the new life. Zainabta stood up, holding little Therese in her arms, and declared confidently to everyone, I used to think love was about receiving what you wanted. But Mrs. Therese taught me that love is about building and protecting what you have together. I once wanted an expensive dress to preserve memories. But now I realize that the most beautiful memory is the peace I feel in my husband's arms. Alaini embraced his wife and child, his heart filled with serenity. He realized that tradition is only beautiful when we understand it with a heart of empathy, not with blind fear. That night, under the moonlight of Lankok district, their family welcomed not only a new member, but also a new way of life, where moderation and gratitude are the most precious treasures. Old Mrs. Therese watched them from the window, smiling contentedly. She knew that little Therese would grow up in a home that wasn't wealthy in money, but incredibly rich in love and wisdom. The scars that people feared would never appear, because true love always has the power to heal all wounds before they even form.